Juan José Arévalo, president of Guatemala from 1945 to 1951, introduces his brand of spiritual socialism and opens up the political system to communist sympathizers. President Jacobo Arbenz, 1951 till 1954, of clear Marxist-Leninist inclination, tried to impulse an agrarian reform law in collusion with the Guatemalan Workers' Party, PGT, the Communist Party of the country in its day. 1962, renegade officers of the army, Lieutenant Marco Antonio Yon and Captain Luis Turcios Lima, led a rebellion against the government of Miguel Ydígoras, 1958 till 1963. This movement was to become the revolutionary movement of the 13th of November, MR13. In the rural communities, recruitment begins for the rebel armed forces, the FAR, which resulted from the union of MR13 and other revolutionary groups. In 1972, the Guerrilla Army of the Poor, EGP, commanded by Rolando Morán, is formed in the Ixcán and Ixil areas of Guatemala. In 1979, the Organization of the People in Arms, ORPA, commanded by Rodrigo Asturias, is formed, with similar Marxist bent as the FAR and EGP. In 1982, the FAR, EGP, and ORPA band together to form the United Guatemalan National Revolutionary Front, URNG, commanded by Rodrigo Asturias. In the early 80s, the internal armed conflict intensifies. The radical left and the guerrilla forces manipulate events and set up situations that make them look like victims of army oppression. Left-wing organizations threaten peasant farmers, obligating them to join the guerrilla ranks and fight the army. Villages are burnt and local leaders are killed. The guerrilla inserts chaos and fear in the rural areas. 1996. The peace accords are signed between the state, the army, and the guerrilla forces under auspices of the international community, on the understanding that there would be mutual amnesty for crimes committed during the internal armed conflict. In 1992, Rigoberta Menchú, a guerrilla, is awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in recognition for her struggle for social justice and indigenous people's rights. This in a clear attempt by the international community to normalize the guerrilla movement. In 1996, the URNG establishes itself as a political party with a radical left-wing ideology, but with meager success at the polls, never over 3%. The URNG allies with the WINAC Party, a left-wing indigenous movement founded by Rigoberta Menchú. The guerrilla, supported by local and international organizations with a left-wing agenda, initiates its political and economic revenge, where the focus of the persecution is, at first, the military, because the army won the internal armed conflict. By the end of the decade, it becomes clear that the objective of the left in Guatemala, besides finishing off the military, is to wage political and economic revenge on the economic elites. A host of radical, violent, anti-systemic, left-wing special interest groups burst onto the Guatemalan political scene, sowing political, economic, and social chaos. Groups such as Codeca, CUC, CCDA, CONIC, etc. are supported by NGOs, foreign governments, international organizations, and their local counterparts. In 2007, another new actor appears in the Guatemalan politics, the UN's International Commission Against Impunity in Guatemala, CICIG. After a controversial start, CICIG would eventually go beyond its original mandate, which was to fight against corruption, by transforming itself into an instrument of political persecution by the Guatemalan and international left against the military and the private sector. in plain violation of the spirit of the 1996 peace accords, show trials are being conducted against military men that participated in the internal conflict. Despite the advanced ages of some of the accused, preventive jail is ordered while these men stand trial, basically rendering them political prisoners. The radical left in Guatemala, with support of the left-wing international community, has created and divulged a false narrative of the internal armed conflict in Guatemala and its aftermath. The stereotype that the left has painted of the right in Guatemala is one of an economic elite without social conscience, exploiters of the downtrodden. The left promotes chaos, social and ethnic resentment. To the left, the war continues by other means and in arenas that they have infiltrated to the point of dominance. Today, Guatemala is submerged in chaos and conflict, suffering from the interference of national and international organizations such as the UN that seek to promote a radical, progressive agenda that effectively destroys traditional Guatemalan institutions such as the church, the army, the family, the sanctity of life, the market economy, in short, everything. If the radical left is to triumph in Guatemala and more generally in Central America, it will persecute and destroy prominent military and business leaders. Tragically, it is succeeding. The success of the radical left in Guatemala will only mean more economic chaos in Central America and more illegal immigration to the United States.